law, the fact that you have enforcement problems already, which are going to be extremely compounded by the inception of this law and the new zoning. And it strikes me that a little more thought needs to go into this from the standpoint of the need, the cost, not today, but the projected cost of doing this. So I haven't heard one thing so far from both sides, okay, that says this is something that is so impending, so cataclysmic, and so important to do. I've heard none of that. I don't understand why we need a house of worship law based on the fact that the numbers don't add up.
Thank you. We don't pass laws based upon majority rules, sometimes, because just because there's a group of people who don't feel as though a law is necessary or is required doesn't necessarily mean there's no need for it. It's obvious that there's a group of folks that don't support this house of worship law. And that is something that you're entitled to feel, and that is your opinion. However, when you say that there's no need, the village trustees felt as though there is a need, because right now we have one version of the house of worship law, 5 acres or more, and we feel as though that we need more than that. And point of fact is, the village, again, as the village attorney has already pointed out, we're already in litigation because of that 5 acres, the sole 5 acres or more rule. So that's with regard to the house of worship. With regard to the financials, Mr. McCullum, for probably 3-4 years, as a result of various Board of Trustee meetings, knowing that we've had issues with code enforcement, I've had folks say, you know what, we don't care, and I say that in a positive way, if our taxes have to go up so long as we know that code enforcement is going to be doing what they need to be doing. So I took that into account. Now, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head right now, Mr. McCollum, all right? You know what your village taxes are right now. But if I told you, or I asked you, and you don't have to answer this, if I said, are you willing to pay 5% more on your village taxes for us to add a full-time building inspector and a full-time code enforcement inspector, would you say yes? 5%.
5%. The potential is that I would say yes, but the first thing I would say is maybe you ought to get the people that are doing this to do their job to start with.
Mr. McCollum, now, that's a point well taken. However, currently, we have two code enforcement officials that work 17 and a half hours each. I am not going to be able to oversee a village of our type and our size with 2 part-time code enforcement officials. Can't happen. It can't happen. I have 1 full-time building inspector. Now, in addition to him also being legally able to do inspections, he also has to administer building permits. He also has to work in concert with the other inspections that are going on as far as violation searches and things of that nature. So I do not have the personnel to cover the entire village. So that's why we are saying, why don't we do it this way? I inherited a building department of 2 part-time code enforcement people and 1 building inspector. That's what I inherited when I took over as mayor, right? And I am going to try to improve upon that. And I understand we don't want to throw money at it. We want to work smarter. I agree with you 110%. Thank you, Mr. McCollum.
Oh, wait, let me address what you just said, okay, if you don't mind.
2 minutes, please.
Then I really
2 minutes.
I agree with you, okay? We should have better code enforcement. You know, you've kind of swayed my opinion on that. So, do you build a house on no foundation? I would suggest that this year, that you build the enforcement, that you build the building inspector force out, that you correct what's not working now before you enter into an agreement where it's already out of control. So, let me agree with you on that point, all right? let's put that down as, we'd like to do this. We'd like to build out our enforcement, and we'd like to build out our capabilities for doing this the right way, rather than having ad hoc decisions about overriding building permits to let people do things. All right? So, all I'm saying to you, see, my mind is a business adventure, okay? I understand that running a village is much, much more difficult than my business, for example. But I do know this, when you do planning, you don't go for the gold ring until you're on the carousel and you're riding the horse already. All right? And so far, all I've seen here is an inability to do the job today, yet we're trying to exponentially build a bigger problem. I think you might want to take a look at this decision, and at the point you feel comfortable that you have a good building enforcement and zoning law, that you go ahead and reintroduce the house of worship law to us all.
But you do know that houses of worship are permitted right now under our current zoning law
I do know that.
in every single residential zoning district in which they will be permitted under the proposed local law. It's the same residential zoning districts. Are other districts involved? Yeah, they're commercial districts, and hasn't been much talk about that. But, I mean, in terms of where they can go today as where they can go tomorrow if this law passed, there's no difference. And I think that's...
I think that's a little, you and I disagree on that, okay? I think you're being a little disingenuous by saying that, because you've said it already exists and it can already be done. So why are we formalizing it?
That's the very logical follow-up question. And the answer to that question is, right now, while houses of worship are permitted in the very same residential districts that we're talking about under the proposed new law, there's different bulk requirements applicable today that would change the route they would have to go to get established, whereas under the new law, there will be different bulk requirements applicable, but there will also be other aspects of the new law codified that will have to be satisfied to put a house of worship in. That balance is something that's going to be tested going forward, but I think it is unfair to say, look, all of a sudden you're allowing a house of worship in 90% of the village, limited to residential. You're allowing it in 100% of the residential area of the village. Well, guess what? They already are.
Thank you.
One of the main purposes of this law from day one in the memo with the plan is to recognize that while we do allow houses of worship by right in a lot of residential zoning districts presently, the code needs to meet in terms of board review, establishment, and enforcement on an ongoing basis.
Which means that you should build it out before you.
Thank you. Thank you,
should
Mr.
build it out
Madison, and
before
thank
you
you,
do
Mr.
it.
McCollum. Does anyone else wish to speak with regard to the agenda items only? Okay, there being none, I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting with regard to the public portion on the agenda items only.
Second.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Valentine, for the motion. Thank you, Trustee Cohen, for the second. All those in favor? Aye. There being none, thank you very much. At this juncture, I will entertain a motion with regard to Resolution 2019-12, approving the proposed law amending the zoning code of the Village of Chestnut Ridge as pertains to the regulation of places of public assembly and houses of worship, Local Law 1 of 2019. Do I hear a motion?
I would like to move that motion.
Thank you, Trustee Cohen, for the motion. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Trustee Miller, for the second. There's a motion on the table. I will give the trustees an opportunity to speak on the motion on the table. I'll start with Trustee Valentine, Trustee Van Alstyne, Trustee Valentine, Trustee Miller, Trustee Cohen, and then I'll finish up. Trustee Van Alstyne.
Good evening. I have some comments about the law.
Make sure your mic is on. And make sure your mic is on.
All right, there's been a lot of misinformation and exaggeration associated with the House of Worship law process. I think the House of Worship law has been handled the same way, such as the parade law, garage law, rental registry law, and entity disclosure law. The public, along with community activists, asked for these laws. They were written, public hearings were held, and the laws were adopted. Exactly the same process as the House of Worship law. The process is the same no matter who suggests the law. Village code provides that a citizen has a right to ask legislators to amend the zoning code, no matter who they are, Village code provides that a citizen has a right to ask legislators to amend the zoning code. For that matter, any code provision of village law. I think that's fair, don't you? Unfortunately, the opposition to the House of Worship law has wasted their time at the public meetings.
Please.
Wasted your time and did not add constructive criticism. Incidentally, the House of Worship law applications will be handled like any other land use application. First step being meeting with the Community Development and Review Committee, comprised, for your information, the village planner, assistant village attorney for planning, and the village consulting engineer. They are experts in this field. The applicant moves on to either planning or the zoning board of appeals. This is the exact same process that's been enforced since 1986. The purpose of the House of Worship law is to give a reasonable and legal guidelines to village boards, a fair and public process. That's a good thing, isn't it? During public hearings, the House of Worship law, a couple of irresponsible comments were made by the opposition to the law. These comments are from the public record and are part of the resolution we're considering tonight. Mr. Wasserman saying RLUIPA has not been adequately tested in our village, so I don't see the need for the extent of the proposed amendment, meaning the House of Worship law. Mr. Wasserman implies, wait till they test our law, meaning suing us. The record shows that municipalities lose these RLUIPA cases and pay astronomical awards for attorney fees and damages. This means tax increases. That's unnecessary tax increases. This is contrary to the best interests of the village as a whole. Mr. Schott said, quote, adopting land regulations that conform to the comprehensive plan provide significant legal protection from such regulations. For your information, a comprehensive plan that restricts constitutionally protected rights is illegal and will not protect the village from lawsuits. Pomona, Airmont, and Clifton, New Jersey are examples of how municipalities have ignored federal laws and lost at a huge cost to taxpayers. Laws must be progressive. They must represent all village residents. The Board of Trustees has a responsibility to change law to meet the current needs of all people. We should embrace progressive laws, shouldn't we? Reading a recent journal news article about coupon, Michael Miller, his founder, is quoted. We don't tolerate bigotry, hatred against anyone. He has also said that he is so conscious of the spread of bigotry and hate that Coupon has specific condemnations of such in his charter. I agree with Michael Miller, and I personally am not a religious bigot. Unfortunately, some members of our community are. Certainly, we all can agree that bigotry. I heard you. Certainly, we all agree that bigotry and hatred have no place in Chestnut Ridge. I hope you can find it in our collective hearts to be tolerant of our fellow Chestnut Ridge residents. After all, they're neighbors. People from outside
Folks, excuse me, please. Thank you.
People from outside our village have also weighed in on the House of Worship law. Representatives from Clarkstown and Orstown are stoking the flames of bigotry and hate for one reason, their own political advancement. Serve America movement is also trying to advance their own radical agenda using Chestnut Ridge as a pawn. Clarkstown and Orangetown politicians and the Civil American movement don't live here, don't know the village, don't belong here. Chestnut Ridge residents know the village, not these outsiders. I believe the village residents should decide on Chestnut Ridge issues. Tell outsiders, mind their own business. In conclusion, the House of Worship law is fair for all Chestnut Ridge residents.
Thank you, Mr. Van Alstyne. Next, I would ask, excuse me, do you, excuse me, would you please, one person at a time? Ma'am, please, thank you. Please, a little bit of decorum. Thank you. Next, we'll have trustee Moon.
Valentine.
Excuse me. Thank you.
I've been a village resident for more than 43 years. But I've not just been a resident, I've served this village. I was for 23 years on the zoning board, most of which I served as chair. And now I'm a village trustee. As a trustee, and I thank the gentleman for raising the issue of money, we have a responsibility to make sure that your money is well spent on things that we should be spending it on, and things that we shouldn't be spending it on. We have had excellent legal representation on this matter. It is quite clear to us, and Mr. Sebastian is our lawyer, but know this, I'm also a lawyer, and so is the mayor. It's not that we don't know this case law. It's not that we don't follow this case law. We do. And we understand the case law that comes up regarding religious uses. It's been said by people here that a religious use has no place in a residential community. Anytime, I'm not looking at you, don't worry about it. Anytime that has been raised in a court, it has lost. Courts have said, and New York courts in particular, that houses of worship are beneficial to the neighborhood. You don't have to accept that. I think you do have to accept it. You have no choice but to accept it. We've also heard other things, and I don't want to call anyone by name. He'll know it because we just heard it. But there was a case a number of years ago in the Court of Appeals of New York. The Court of Appeals of New York is the Supreme Court in every other state. The Court of Appeals of New York is the highest court. You lose in the Court of Appeals, the only place you go is the U.S. Supreme Court. And in a case called the Diocese of Rochester versus the Planning Board, the Court of Appeals held that it was improper to exclude a church from being built in a built-up residential neighborhood solely because of a potential for a negative effect on property values because of the loss of tax revenue, the decreased enjoyment of neighboring properties, and potential traffic hazards. Virtually every objection that we heard, that you say we ignored, we know the courts have rejected. And one of our responsibilities as trustees is to not permit the village to get embroiled in litigation it cannot win. Pomona just got hit with a $5 million legal fee for their opposition to certain religious uses. And that's just the legal fees. That's not the damage. Whether insurance will cover the damages or not remains to be seen. But as a trustee, I'm not here to let my money go to lawsuits that can't be won. All my life I've spent defending lawsuits and understanding which ones to defend and which ones not to defend. I make judgments all the time in my legal career about which lawsuits are worth it and which aren't. Which ones do I want to cite a principle? in the hope that I can convince a court. I argued one principle in about 4 or 5 different courts before I finally won. A lot of people told me to give it up, but I thought I was right. But this is not right. I cannot argue against religious uses in a fully built up residential community. Now, I can make an argument in the law that what we're doing is right, both from the point of view of dollars, from the point of view of our reputation as a village, from the point of view of village residents, and what we think is right for at least some of the residents. There has been an influx into this village of the Orthodox Jewish community. In my neighborhood especially, virtually every house that's on sale, there are a number of them, are being purchased by members of the Orthodox Jewish community. And I welcome what you had said before. It's nice to see all these kids back in the street, riding their bikes and playing around. It's lovely. It's a wonderful thing.
Not all the school buses.
So,
Please, thank you.
I agree the school buses are an issue, Mr. Liberal.
They are,
That doesn't
big issue.
mean, that doesn't mean we don't welcome residents with children. We should do more regarding the school buses that are speeding, I agree. And we are trying to notify the police, sir, about the speeders, and I would hope to see more being done about that. But even if the law did not provide what it does, even if the law would permit us to say, you can't pray, we would not go along with it. We as a board would not go along with it. And the reason we wouldn't is that we have empathy for our residents. And we have a community of people that is growing, true, but even if they're not growing, we have a community of people that need places of worship that they can walk to. It is not fair to tell them to walk a mile, 2 miles in bad weather, or half a mile in bad weather. It's not fair. It's just not right. And how people in the community can forget that because they're somehow worried about their housing values. What do you think? I'm not worried about my housing values? I gotta say, thanks to the OJC, my housing values have gone up, but that's besides the point. Keep it down. But I am worried about the exact same things as every objector was worried about. But as a truck, you're telling me I'm not? This lady has called out all day.
Excuse me,
I mean,
one
you are
conversation.
I hate. In any event, just as a matter of humanity, I would not make people, I don't care what religious faith they are, have to walk long distance in order to pray. And I understand that there's a part of our community, a growing part of the community, that requires neighborhood and residential houses of worship so they can effectively pray. And I'll also add one other thing. I walk around my neighborhood all the time. I drive my bike around before I had an accident, around the neighborhood. And I stop and I ask people what they think. I introduce myself and ask what they think about the village, what we should do more. And as I said, it's a growing Orthodox community, and I wound up speaking to the Orthodox representatives there, the Orthodox people. They all tell me the same thing. Don't change the village. Keep it the same. And I see a lot of members of the Orthodox Jewish community in the audience. I will say I know they feel the same way. But having felt that way, and according to their, and making their need, and getting met their needs, are consistent. Because they have no objective to destroy this village. Their objective is to keep the village peaceful, attractive to people who want to move in. And they're helping us, and they will help us. In the residential houses of worship in particular, you'll have houses of worship that no one driving around this neighborhood would know that it's acting as a synagogue. It will look like every other house. And because of what we're doing, it will have order to the chaos that we have now. We have about 16 or 18 illegal synagogues now. But you can't stop me from having a group of people come to my house to watch football games. I can't stop a group of people come to your house to pray. If you want, call it an email. And if I could, my humanity tells me I wouldn't. I am not a religious Jew. I am Jewish, but I'm not a religious Jew. I drive to synagogue when I drove to synagogue. But I understand fully that people can't. And why am I telling them they can't move in here? Because I'm not going to accommodate them. I'm not going to do that as your trustee. I'm going to make sure all village residents are accommodated in the best way we can so that we maintain and not destroy this village.
Thank you, Councilman. Deputy Mayor Valentine.
Good evening, neighbors. You know, I realize there are neighbors who feel hurt because they feel they have not been heard. But I also realize that there's a more sinister element here in Chestnut Ridge, at Washington Ridge. It's really not about this law, it's about how we exercise revenge. And how do we keep and manipulate anger? Let me say to you that
You know, I will not be called a racist. I'm sick of
I
all
don't know
of it.
what you
I
think.
didn't
Excuse us, excuse us, there's one meeting, thank you. You're welcome to leave.
Could you just restate what you said? I didn't hear it.
anger.
I didn't hear what you
I
said.
live in Chestnut Ridge. I've raised my daughters here in Chestnut Ridge, and I've raised my sons here in Chestnut Ridge. You know, at one of our meetings here, there was a 25-year-old woman who came up to me. And she said to me, because I walk my community, those who know me, they know I walk Balmoral Drive. I walk Windview. I walk Lillian Drive. I walk Ross. I walk it every day. I help folks with their groceries. I help them in their yards. I sit and talk to all my neighbors on a regular basis. That's nothing new for me. In fact, when I'm sometimes they even walk with me. But this young lady who lives on Balmoral Drive, she came up to me after one of the meetings. She said, "Mr. Valentine, I'm afraid." I said, "What?" She says, "I'm afraid for me and my children." And I said to myself, is this the Chestnut Ridge we're all proud of? Is this the one where those with hidden agendas drive fear, exaggerations, with fake news through emails, and alternative facts? A complete retreat from the facts. And they say they're Chestnut Ridge insiders, but when they hold meetings, they have folks coming from Stony Point, Orangetown, and other places to incite folks. You know, Roger Stone, who worked for the current administration in Washington, said anger and hate will move people. I don't believe that those who claim to be insiders here in Chestnut Ridge, but are actually outsiders with personal agendas. And those personal agendas are affecting how we are as citizens here, neighbors in Chestnut Ridge. Neighbors that I see every day when I walk these streets. Every day when I talk to them. It is time for us to stand together. I took an oath when I came into this office. I worked 40 years for the state, for 2 governors. I worked on the planning board here for almost 12 years. I think I've done my job in public service, where I don't have to work with and do things that are not right and not above board. My wife tells me, can't you ever say no to something? But if I feel it's the right thing to do, I will continue to do it. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and New York State, to tell the truth and use the Constitution to protect everyone's rights, not just a few folks' rights, based on laws, based on legislation, based on facts, not opinions, not alternative facts, and not